Well, hello there. Have you ever wanted to travel in the steps of Jesus? Well, I definitely have wanted to do that, and we're going to do that right now to the best that we can. We're going to use the periodic table of history time machine, and we're going to zoom into our geography so we can get a better understanding of the geography that Jesus actually walked. And we're way out here in the Atlantic now, but we're going to zoom into Spain just like we were in an airplane, getting closer and closer to the Mediterranean Sea. We're going to fly over the Mediterranean. You can see Nazareth there in the background because that's our destination. But I think flying in this way helps us to get an understanding that if we were on an airplane, this is what we would see. We're flying over Greece. Crete is over there on our right side. Turkey and Cyprus are in front of us. And we're getting really close to Nazareth now. It's really important to know where the Mediterranean Sea is and where the Sea of Galilee is and the Jordan that runs down into the Dead Sea. When we know all of those landmarkers, it helps us out immensely. Well, this book starts with John the Baptist. It bypasses Jesus just a little bit. And it comes into the scene a little bit later. Remember John the Baptist, he was that hairy hippie guy, and then he ate locusts. He's sort of that weird uncle character that everybody has. Well, let's look at this for a second. Let's look at the tracks, what we're going to be going on. The actual tracks of Jesus are out. He starts in Nazareth, goes down to where John the Baptist is down here, down by the Dead Sea, south part of the Jordan. He goes out into the wilderness, and then in blue, he comes back and then starts his ministry. He goes up into Galilee. Let me put that on the map for a section. There's Galilee in the purple. It's the northern part of Israel, whereas Samaria was in the center and Judah was in the south. But we'll get to know that after Jesus was baptized and went out into the wilderness, he came up here into the land of Galilee and then went over here to the Sea of Galilee. So that's the overview of what we're going to be looking at. But now let's see what Jesus saw when he was growing up. He was living in Nazareth, and this is a decently high area. From here you could see a lot of the agricultural land below. You could see the Jordan River. There would have been really nice sunrises out here where the light shimmered off that Jordan River, or he got glimpses of the water. I don't know if he could see all the way to the Dead Sea from here. Now he probably got glimpses of the Sea of Galilee. I'm going to click over there where the Sea of Galilee is. And then here we are at Nazareth. I like to get situated so we can go in line with our tracks. And our tracks are outbound in red. If you were traveling to this area, you might see the Church of the Annunciation. There are plenty of tourist traps right there. And like I said, Mark starts off with John the Baptist and descriptions of him. And it came to pass in those days that Jesus came from Nazareth of Galilee and was baptized of John in Jordan. So let's make our way across there. You can see some landmarks out here. It would be easy to navigate this area. As long as you were growing up in this area, you would know all the names of these mountains. So Jesus made it across this plain, this agricultural area. He's getting closer and closer to the Jordan River. And Jesus pops up there in Mark 1:9. You can familiarize yourself with Mark. We're going to be going through Mark 1 and 2. Now notice there's already a path down here. Probably it changed a little bit, but probably the idea would have been the same. You wanted to be far enough away from the marshy part of that Jordan to walk through here, and probably far enough away from these foothills. You would negotiate those 2 points, and then everybody would be walking along here, creating a path after they walked along the grass. So at the same time, it's real semi-arid. You have the Jordan River that has given life to this whole valley. And when we get down here, notice that we're getting close to Jericho is off to our right. We can see the Dead Sea in front of us. I'm clicking on that. And then Jericho off to our right. And then Jerusalem is up past the hills. We can't see it because these hills are in the way. But Jerusalem is beyond the mountains here. See, I think that gives us really good perspective to know those things. Well, there's a tourist trap right here in the south of Jordan before you get to the Dead Sea. And of course, it's close to Jerusalem and Jericho, so there's going to be a large population that can get in here and have access to this. Well, a baptistry has been built here, and supposedly it is the traditional site of where Jesus was baptized and where John the Baptist baptized. So that is an amazing thing. It'd be really great to check that out. There's a picture of it. And he was there in the wilderness 40 days tempted of Satan. So we're getting up here into the wilderness. Now look beyond. I just have tracks going out east. Okay, let's gain some altitude. And then let's make our way up here over these hills. Because right after Jesus was baptized, remember the Spirit came down like a dove on top of Jesus, and then he went out into the wilderness. We don't have any specification of where that was, but you can see it gets pretty arid as we go out east. There we go. We've gained some altitude there. So we're at Mark 1:13. That Jesus was in the wilderness for 40 days. Not a very pretty land to my liking. Yeah, so outbound to this point is going to be red. And this is that area that might be the wilderness where Jesus went. And you can just follow along in Mark and get all the details from that book. So Satan is a pretty tempting fellow, but Jesus didn't fall for his traps. He's probably not the red-skinned monster that Hollywood depicts him as. He comes as an angel of light, and he's pretty crafty. He uses some pretty effective tools against humanity. So here is the overlook of this next part. In Mark 1:14, we see that Jesus went to Galilee. So here is the Galilee bounds, just like I had them on before, but now we see them from a different direction. Jesus would have come up this way, and probably this is when he went over and read Isaiah up in Nazareth, and they didn't receive him. He said, the prophecy is fulfilled in your ears. And sometimes I wonder if a whole lot of prophecies are being fulfilled right before our eyes with the state of Israel right now. Yeah, but since he went up into the land of Galilee, it's after this, in Mark, he has a really good overview way of writing. I like his style. And he talks about in Mark 1:16 that Jesus was by the Sea of Galilee. So Jesus would have made his way over these hills in some fashion and gone down to this sea. And this is where a lot of the story picks up. We get a lot of details of miracles and the details, the stories that we remember from going to church is from a lot of the events that happened on the north side of Galilee. We're still going to be going out here on blue. And notice there are a bunch of fields down here. I see a couple places where there are fields. Out here directly in the north and right where we are looking down in. And I see some places where boats might be. Well, in Mark 1:21, Jesus went to the synagogue. And it's right by this area that Jesus gets the first 4 disciples. It says in Mark 1:16, he picked up Simon and Andrew. And you could see how they were probably right there with their nets. And then he also got James and John. So those are the first 4. They were fishermen right here. And here, let me change the direction so we can look up while this is rotating. Because there's a synagogue right here in Capernaum, which is on the north side of the Sea of Galilee. But you can see the mountains up above. If you were in a boat, you could see all these mountains. And if you were down here in the city, you could also look up and see this area. You could about see Nazareth from here. It'd be a distant hill. But do you see these fields out here? Any one of these might be the places where Jesus and his disciples went out to the cornfields. So there we are, Mark 1:21. And they went into Capernaum, and straightway on the Sabbath day he entered into the synagogue. So a lot of events happened on the Sabbath day, but that was because there was all that teaching that was going on. And then the Pharisees and Sadducees had the problem with doing work on the Sabbath. And he preached in their synagogues throughout all Galilee and cast out devils. Okay, so now we see that word Galilee once again. Let me zoom out a little bit so we get a better perspective of that. See, there's that purple again. Have the Capernaum synagogue. And then the home of Peter and Andrew. So when the Bible says he went all over Galilee, I'm going to put Nazareth back on the map. See, that's right in the center of this area. So you can follow the blue. See, I'm just clicking on the graph, and that gets us up to the synagogue. And then when the Bible says Jesus went out over Galilee, driving out demons, then he went around this area. Sidon is over here. And I'm just clicking all around there. Throughout all Galilee. Now there is the story of the leper at the end of Mark, and this is what initiated that Jesus got so popular that he had to go out into the deserted places. And when I look at this area, this might be the area of the deserted places, because the populated areas are right here in Galilee. So farther out here to the east, that's going to be where the deserted places might have been. We're just trying to get as good a feel that we can for this as we can. But Jesus didn't want to be this popular at this point, but the leper kept on publishing what Jesus had done to heal him. And then Jesus couldn't just go right into any city anymore. All right, so after all of that cacophony, Jesus and those disciples are back here at Capernaum. And we're going to travel just a little bit along these tracks before we end. And there it is. Just try to get your sights on what it looked like, because that's what this video is all about. Looking out there on the horizon and seeing those mountains. You know, looking down here and thinking about people fishing or using their boats for recreation or traveling back and forth across this Sea of Galilee. So in Mark 2:1, Jesus is back in Capernaum. And it was noised that he was in the house. So he went into a house at this time. See, so there is just any typical house. It could have been house of Peter, but we aren't really told about that. So the sick of the palsy, a person is healed. That's when the people were taking the thatching off the roof so they could get the sick of the palsy person to be lifted into that house. That's happening right here. And this is the scene. So Jesus is going back and forth along this bank, and he calls Levi in Mark 2:13. And let's look out over the sea as they're walking, as these 5 disciples now and Jesus are walking along this coast. They look to the south and they see this beautiful area. They look across the Sea of Galilee. They can see over there, there's Decapolis across the area. Deca for 10 cities, Decapolis. So that's what they would have been looking at. And then I mentioned earlier those cornfields. Well, at some point in time, Jesus and those 5 disciples are walking through the cornfields. So I think it might have been these. We don't know for sure, but this is a very likely area. You can see how the water runs off of these mountains. And then there's nice flat land that has been cultivated. And this area gets full sun, so that would have been perfect for growing corn. And the Bible does tell us it was corn. So right out here, the Pharisees and Sadducees had a problem with Jesus going through those fields and using their hands to pluck those ears of corn. I'll have a few different videos on the tracks of Jesus. They're quite extensive, but pretty dense in this area. And this is the kingpin area for the early ministry of Jesus. And so go ahead and familiarize yourself with Mark chapter 1 and 2, and the next marker will be in Mark chapter 3 when we can continue our study. Yeah, so hopefully you're getting a bit of a feel for the direction. Just imagine that you were taking a cruise or you were taking some type of a travel trip over here, and you flew into Europe, and then you got on a smaller plane and were flying across the Mediterranean Sea, and now you're down here in the Levant and in the area of Galilee where Jesus actually lived. I think this gives us a really good feel for that, and hopefully that helps you. So remember to like, share, and subscribe, and you can click on the channel name and get to more videos. Hopefully these videos are helpful for studying historical context and for people in the Bible. Thanks a lot. Have a great day.